Blanche. Oh, okay, you got it. Okay, he was looking for it. He's looking for it. I think he's getting one. Yeah. Here, I think I can get him from here. I'm a good. Hey, Gene. Hey, I owe Gene an apology right off the bat. Remember last week he asked me a question, and I wanted to come back to him, and then Mr. Wakeland Mr. Wakeland asked a question, and then I never got back. Hey, Gene. Gene, do you remember that? You remember that comment you made last week? You can't hear without. Is he going to put the thing in? Okay, no big deal. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming. This might be trickling in a little bit, and we'll stall a little bit because there might be a few more coming. Mr. Blake, how are you doing? Do you need to talk with me? You give me some phone calls. Anything you won the lottery, you want to share it with me? Something like that? Speak up. We're all friends. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 8. And I know we have a couple of first timers here, right? And we are blazing through the book of Hebrews. So we should be. I tried to time the end. I tried to time the end of the class with the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I don't know when that's going to be, but now we're going to be in chapter 8. Chapter 8's not very long. So what I'd like to do is just in a moment, after we talk about prayer requests, we'll go back and pick up chapter 7. We'll review a little bit, and then I'll start doing some reading. I'm going to start reading about, let's see. I'm going to read and go back and read in chapter 7, starting in verse 18. And I'll kind of just pick up, see if there's any questions. There was a lot of things I wasn't able to cover last time, which is no big deal. But if there's any questions, we'll review quickly, then we'll read chapter 8. And chapter 8, again, is not as long as chapter 7, but they overlap quite a bit. We're going to see a lot written about the better covenant, which we're going to talk about. Last time was a better priesthood. This time's a better priesthood and a better covenant. So we'll pick up there in just a minute in chapter 7, verse 18. First of all, any prayer requests? I know your mom fell down and hurt her back. She didn't fall, she just hurt it? Tornadoes in Alabama. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Hurricanes going through, or tornadoes going through Alabama, and his mother has hurt her back, so he's down to visit. Hey, Joe. Anything, Blanche? Your cousin Ruth. Okay.
My younger sister, I think before last I put her on prayer list for colon cancer.
Yeah.
She had a heart attack. They operated on her yesterday. She's doing fine. Still went to prayer soon.
Okay.
Having a little knee master.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Let me pray for what's your name? Linda and Robert Copeland. All right. Yeah, sure do. Doug, anybody to pray for? How's your shoulder doing? Doing good? Okay. It's better? All right.
And pray for the teacher.
Pray for the teacher. That's at the top in italics, actually. Yeah, bold. Good. Okay, let's have a quick prayer, and then we'll get into our study. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this evening we had to be together, and we so appreciate you preserving your word for us. Be with me tonight as I do my best to maybe encourage those that are here to read and study the book of Hebrews on their own. There's a lot to it. There's a lot that I've learned, and I'm so thankful for that. But there's so much that we can't cover, so it needs personal attention, Father. So be with us as we do our best to grasp what we can this evening and throughout the end of this study. And be with those that are here this evening. Help our hearts and minds be open to your word. And Father, help us to be mindful of those that were just mentioned that we need to think about in prayer. Those with gone through surgeries and those that were brought up in prayer. John David and his situation and the poor weather up in Alabama, the tornadoes. Help keep that area safe, Father. And be with those who are housebound still. Those that need our prayers, that are members and the visitors, and normally they'd be here, but they can't be here. So much to think about on our prayer list. And be with our elders and our deacons. Be with the Naples Church. Help us to be effective here in this area, Father. Father, forgive us of our sins, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, let's pick up some reading, and then we'll have some comments. We'll pick up our reading in chapter 7, verse 18. I'd like to do a little review. There was a lot we didn't cover with last time, but we saw that this theme of Jesus is better, continuing with a better priesthood. And then we're going to talk about Jesus and as far as the new covenant, a better covenant. And I want to answer your question that you brought up last week, too, in just a moment. But I'll do some reading. You asked me, do you remember what you asked me, Gene? You asked me... Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. He asked me about, which I didn't know anything about. He had mentioned right before we talked about Abraham being a Gentile, and the fact that Melchizedek blessed. Do you remember that comment you made? Do you remember the extent of it? What we? Yeah, because I think you were onto something. I think you're right, and I did not know. I just assumed that Abraham was a Jew, but he wasn't. He was a Gentile, and so was Melchizedek was a Gentile as well. Yeah, everybody's a Gentile up till that point. Yeah, but I really didn't know that, and you made that comment, and I thought that's interesting. Let me come back, and then I got lost. But your comment went on a little bit more. I don't remember all of it, but I don't know if there's anything to that you remember or you can bring up. You thought it was interesting that Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek as a Gentile. And I dug a little bit on that. The only thing that I came up with, which I thought was interesting, is it was about 2000 BC when that meeting took place. And Mr. Kaufman here also talked about it a little bit in the commentary that I purchased. And there was he made some comments about, and we probably don't think about it enough, is that there was quite a few believers that weren't Jews back then. Because one would assume, the Jews really weren't noted to be Jewish until around the exile, to when they returned from Persia after being in exile for 70 years. That's when the name Jew finally stuck to the Jewish race. And I thought it was much earlier than that. So you made a comment. Does that make sense? A little bit? I don't know exactly what your comment was, but I did not know that Abraham was a Gentile, and I did not know that Melchizedek, or everybody was a Gentile back then, right? So I don't know exactly what your comment was, but I apologize for skipping over it. If it comes to you, just flag me down and we'll do it again, okay? Okay, verse 18, chapter 7. The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect, and the better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests with an oath, but he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever." That comes from Psalm 110. Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantor of a better covenant. Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely. those who come to God through him because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest truly meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priest, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for our sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weakness, but the oath, which came after the law, appointed the Son, who has been made perfect forever. Now, the main point of what we are saying is this. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven and who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle set up by the Lord, not by a mere human being. Every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, and so it was necessary for this one also to have something to offer. If he were on earth, he would not be a priest, for there are already priests who offer the gifts prescribed by the law. They serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and a shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned when he was about to build the tabernacle. Quote, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain." That comes from Exodus 25, verse 40, unquote. But in fact, the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs as the covenant which he is a mediator is superior to the old one, since the new covenant is established on better promises. For if there had been nothing wrong with the first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. But God found fault with the people and said, and here the author now is going to go back to the Old Testament, Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 through 34. He's going to use the Old Testament to make his case. "The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand and led them out of Egypt, because they did not remain faithful to my covenant, and I turned away from them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I will establish with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my laws in their minds. I will write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, 'Know the Lord,' because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their wickedness, and I will remember their sins no more." Unquote. By calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete. And what is obsolete and outdated will soon disappear. It means it's no longer useful. Okay, does that make sense? It'd be like a bowling ball that you had 10 years ago, right? It'd be obsolete. You need a new bowling ball. All right?
Back in verse 18 of chapter 7,
Yes?
the distant knowledge being done away with completely.
Verse 7,
Verse 18.
verse 18.
Chapter 7, verse 18.
Oh, back, okay, chapter 7. Yeah, the reason I started there was exactly that. There was a lot that we didn't get to talk about, and there's so much in this book that we can't possibly, hang around and dig too deeply. Yeah, and what was your comment?
I was going to ask you, I wanted to ask you another question. When Judah, Christ came out of Judah, is this the reason why that he called them Jews? They were never called Jews before.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about.
Christ coming out of Judah.
Yeah, that's a
God, and Jesus is God, and therefore we are gods. He says, I call you God, called Jews gods in the old Bible.
okay.
And God was trying to put it together.
Okay.
Is he talking about the name Jew, the term?
Is that what you're talking about? The name Jew, the term Jew?
They started, F. Bruce said that the lower kingdom, the two tribes in the lower kingdom were the Jews, and I think what was the other tribe? Benjamite? Yeah. Anyway, the Jews got so big that they swallowed up the other tribe in the southern kingdom, and eventually, instead of calling them Judas, it was a slang term, just say Jew. So he said that's where that term came from.
Okay.
It was after the exile,
Yeah.
because
Was
the
it-
10 tribes were the
So it was
northern
after the exile, right? Yeah,
and
that
two
was,
tribes in the southern kingdom.
that's kind of what I had,
Theory,
that's what I read, that the name Jew didn't really stick to the Jews until after the exile. When they came back, actually, they were released from the Persians and they were allowed to come back to Israel.
The preacher at the Church of Christ in Jerusalem, Joseph Shulam, said that it's so strange because there were so many commands that the Jews couldn't keep them all, and it discouraged them. And he said that in 1985, the first time we were there, he said only 15% of the Jews are practicing Jews now.
In Jerusalem? Really?
In Jerusalem. I thought they were all practicing.
Yeah.
He said only 15%.
Wow.
And our guide backed that up. He said the same thing.
Really?
It was shocking, really.
You mean because the law is just too much? It's just
Yeah,
too,
613 laws.
Yeah, that's a lot.
They spent their
That's a
whole
lot.
life trying to keep
Yeah.
all those laws. So he felt it discouraged people.
Yeah, that would do it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, every time you turn around, that's, it'd be tough not to break a law just in everyday life without doing anything. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if there are any Jews that today that do the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices.
That's a good question. I've never heard of
Because
it.
that was part of the law. That was an integral part of the law.
It had to be done at the temple, and there is no more temples.
Right.
There is no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, they stopped doing it in the synagogues, but as far as we know, they don't do it. Maybe some Orthodox sect somewhere hidden we
Yeah.
don't know about, but they stopped making sacrifices. Good
Thank
question,
goodness.
Glenn.
Thank goodness the old system is gone. That would be, can you imagine how many, I couldn't imagine having to do that. Thank God for his grace that that's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. We have a situation here, we're moving from, again, keep in mind what we're doing here. We have one Hebrew writing to a group of Hebrews trying to convince them to stop acting like Hebrews, trying to ask them to give up 1,500 years of learned behavior. And the priest, a Jewish priest under the Levitical system, they were worshipped by the, pretty, let's say, the serious Jew who was, went to the temple every day and did their sacrifices. And I mean, that was their way of life. And all of a sudden, this guy, right, the writer here, I think it's probably more than likely that this author knows these people and he's spoken to them about this before. And again, the temptation, and I've said this before, the temptation, you've got probably three types, from what I can tell, three types of people in this audience. Really solid Jewish Christians, mediocre Christians, and then some that have fallen away. So he's got a task and a half here. He's trying to convince, the ones that are weak and have fallen away to come back or hang in there, and at the same time, build up the stronger Christians, the stronger Jewish Christians. But what's going on here is that many of these Jewish Christians are trying to play both sides of the law. They're trying to relieve some of the persecution on them by going to the temple. And we see this in Jeremiah too. We see that, which we'll talk about in a little while, is that to take some of the persecution off of them, they're going to the temple and making sacrifices so their friends see them doing the sacrificial Levitical requirements, and yet they're going back into their life and they're going back and they're studying and hanging out with their Christian friends as well, trying to play. And the author in here is saying, that the Holy Spirit is obviously the author is making the comment in here, that's bad. You don't want to do that. I mean, it not only is it wrong, it is bad. You have to get rid of this old covenant worship style right away. It's a huge challenge. And can you imagine being told that that the old covenant is obsolete, and that's all you've known for all your life? Yes, Gene.
Almost no another question next. Here when it says in verse 13 of chapter 8, the old covenant done away with is now ready to be vanished away. Now, this was written in AD 60 to AD 70. Jerusalem hasn't been destroyed yet.
That's right.
The temple is still there. They still sacrifice the thing. Now, when the Roman army comes in and destroys that, then Christ is living in our hearts. There's no more temple. There's no more sacrifice. No more nothing. Right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yep, this is about 65 to 69 AD. And I think you're absolutely right. I think God used the Roman army to put an end to the temple, the second temple. I think it was planned, and it was never to be, no more temples were resurrected. It became synagogue worship. It was already some synagogue worship at that time. But when the second temple was destroyed, that was it. And I think that was planned all along. Now, it's taken a while. That comment you just made there, Gene's a good one, because here the comment, the very last verse, right, of 8. By calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete. And what is obsolete is outdated and will soon disappear. So that's what I think exactly what he means. Is that God, I think, used Vespasian, Emperor Titus Vespasian, the Roman general, to attack the city, destroy the temple. And I think that was, I don't know what you think, Russ, but I think that was one of the, God saying, look, we're going to, I think 35, 40 years after Jesus died, I think it's time to put this temple stuff to bed. Does that make sense? A little bit? No? Yes, ma'am.
I'm pretty sure that when the temple was destroyed, the records were destroyed also, and I don't believe the Hebrew people can now trace themselves back to Abraham. It seems like I've heard that in a study before. Have you heard that? They can no longer, their ability to trace themselves back to the Old Testament is not possible, or their original tribes or anything.
Oh,
And that's something they were very proud of.
yeah. Yeah, one thing we talked about Melchizedek last time, and one of the things that was interesting is that, the book of Genesis is a book of genealogies, and not to have any mention of when Melchizedek, and any genealogy leading up to his life, is very rare, and not to have any genealogy after that, which I thought was quite interesting. We'll talk about that in a little bit more, but if that's the case, I'm going to lose my power bill. If I just lose my Florida power and light bill, maybe, yeah, I won't have to pay it. All right? I think you're right, Gene. I like that. That's what I'm thinking, and that's what Mr. Kaufman was talking about a little bit too, Russ. Okay? Any questions? Any more comments there? So we're seeing a transition here from chapter 7 to chapter 8, where, okay, Jesus is a better priest than the old Levitical system. Now we're going to see that now he has a better covenant. And we're going to see that theme run into later chapters as well. He's our priest forever, right, in the order of Melchizedek, exactly. And there's all kinds of applications there. Let's back up a little bit so I don't get too far ahead of myself here. Any questions at all on chapter 7? Any comments from last time? Everybody understands all that? Okay, good. Talk about, the more I read about this oath in Psalms 110, Mr. Kaufman thinks that's a really, really big deal. It's one of the most important scriptures. The oath was David in Psalm 110, talking about what? What was the oath given? What was it about? So we picked up reading in chapter 7, verse 18. The former regulation is set aside. That's the old covenant, because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect. And a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. That's Jesus. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath. That's the old covenant. All priests are appointed, but the old covenant priests weren't confirmed by an oath. But Jesus was in Psalm 110. David prophesies that God has made his decision. Right here it says in verse 20 or 21, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. That's Psalm 110, verse 4. And that's David prophesying that God has given his word that Jesus is going to be our priest forever. Now again, keep in mind what's going on. You got this author trying to convince these Jews they've got to let the old covenant go. Amen. They've got to let the old covenant go, and it's just not that easy for these people. They're heavily invested in this Levitical system still, and can you imagine? You got the overlapping of cultures. And that's why I think this verse, the last verse in chapter 8, what does it say? I think part of that, it says, by calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete, and what is obsolete and outdated will soon disappear. I think God very well expected that this was going to drag on, that these Jews couldn't simply just cut ties with Judaism like that. I think you're just talking about this thing just being torn away from them. And that's why I think, Gene, you're right. I think the Roman army came into Palestine and it zigzagged its way down through the country, and it was all kinds of Jewish uprisings, and it just kept snuffing them out little by little. And the army worked its way all the way to Jerusalem and destroyed the city and the temple. And I think that was a sign from God that he's putting his foot on this, and he's had enough. He's going to be a little bit more firmer. It took him, I think that's 35 years after Jesus was died on the cross.
We were watching that video. How many months it took?
I think it was 5. I think it was 4 or 5 months, wasn't it?
At least, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 4 or 5 months. The general, Nero sent out this general named Vespasian to conquer all these uprisings. And the Jews had uprisings all the time against the Romans. The Romans were they were pretty brutal. And I think that the siege, if I'm not correct, it was 4 or 5 months. And that city was, I've never been there. You talked about the city, they came in from the northwest side where there was everything else is valleys and defended really well. I mean, you could imagine why it would take so long. They just didn't have the advantage. There's no way.
They could get their rams up against the wall on a level place.
Yeah. And they attacked from the northwest, and they came around and they did other things, and they surrounded the city to make sure no one got away after a while because people were getting away. It was crazy. It's on YouTube. If you want to see something fascinating, I kind of like that stuff. Maybe we should come in and play that on. It doesn't take very long. It's also has a narrator that talks about the battles. I guess Josephus really kept track of that. So that was quite the temple being destroyed in AD 70, I think that was a marker. God trying to speed up this transition from, hey, Jesus has come. He's better in every way. And what have we learned so far since the beginning? He's better than angels. He's better than Moses. He's better than Joshua. He's better than any prophet or king. He's better. He has a better priesthood. He's got a better name. We're going to read some more about. He's going to have a better reigning in heaven. Let's talk about that. So let's go really quickly on the oath here. Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantor of a better covenant. So this is the first mention of the covenant. We're going from better priesthood to better covenant. Very late. That's chapter 7, verse 22. It's 23. Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. So the priesthood under the Levitical system, they were only priests for life, right? When they died, they were no longer priests. Now, what you're seeing here is the contrast between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The Old Covenant was the priests were human beings. They were full of faults, full of sin. They had to sacrifice sins for other people and themselves. Jesus had no sin. They died. He's never going to die. So there's a lot of contrasting going on here. Verse 24, but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely. So that reference there is one where the old law could never save. It wasn't designed to save. The new law is designed to save. Not only save, but save completely, which we're going to see more of that in a moment. Those who come to God through him, because he always lives, that's why Jesus lives, to intercede for them. And that's a huge point here in this priesthood scenario that I'm seeing, is that God lives to intercede for us. It's just amazing what he does on our behalf with God the Father to help us deal with our Christianity. That's right. That's exactly right. And there's even a further mystery is the trilogy, right? God divides himself into three parts, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And really, when Jesus died on the cross, a part of God died on the cross. Verse 26, such a high priest truly meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. And that's another aspect, theme here as far as the priesthood is concerned. When you read that, exalted above the heavens, think about it. Under the Levitical system, the tabernacle, everything was on earth, right? God's house was on earth. It was a temporary house, a mobile house, first mobile home that I know of, mentioned in the Bible. And now everything's in heaven. Jesus moved to the earthly tabernacle. Let's talk about that. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day by day, first for our own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weakness, but the oath made by David, which came after the law, 600 years after the law, appointed the Son, Jesus, who has been made perfect forever. So it's all contrasting. Here's your idea to think about. You're trying to convince your friends, your loved one, your church members, any way you can, and the best way to do it. There's a good indication from what I'm reading is that a lot of this audience are priests. They're Jewish priests who converted to Christianity, so they're very knowledgeable about. They've had to read this stuff over. They had to know it back and forwards. Last time when I did my class on the Torah, I read a lot of Jewish scholars, and one in particular I remember talked about really devout Jews. When they go to synagogue, they read a portion of, and they always did, even back in the synagogues, back in Jesus' time, is that they would read a portion of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and as soon as they got done, they started again. So they read it from Genesis through Deuteronomy, and then they go back and read it again and again and again, and they would have large portions of the Torah memorized. So they know this stuff back and forward. So let's continue on. Verse 8. So now the author says, now the main point of what we're saying is this. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven. So here again, he's making a contrast, right? The earthly tabernacle is gone. The Levitical system is gone. The new tabernacle is where Jesus is. So when Jesus went behind the veil, right, he's in the earthly tabernacle. He is right with God. That's the new earthly tabernacle. Under the old system, hey Marvin, under the old system, right, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest sacrifices some animals, takes some animal blood, goes behind the curtain, sprinkles blood on the Ark of the Covenant. So that was animal blood used to atone for sins. Now, Jesus gives his own blood to get behind the curtain, right? And he's staying there permanently, okay? He's not there temporarily. The priest was only in the Holy of Holies for a very short amount of time. Then he was out. Well, Jesus is there permanently. He's there all the time, sitting at the right hand of the majesty of God.
Does that mean the curtains are our heart, right? Is that because he lives in our hearts?
That's correct. He does now. Yes. That's the
Because
plan.
remember in that burial, he lives in our hearts. That Ray Van thing.
That's right. The Ray Vanderlaan. That's very good. Excellent. Any comments?
You know, it's interesting, you think the Jews that had already been hearing from Paul all that time, and you talk about, the old law was a tutor, a tutor, what is a tutor? It's one that's teaching, of things to come, kind of like a child when they're learning in school, what they would have to know later on. And then he also mentions quite a bit about this thing about that it's a shadow of things.
That's right.
I had somebody one preacher that mentioned, that which would you rather have? Would you rather have a real person than a shadow? You don't want to be, you're not wanting to be meet a shadow. You want to meet the real person. In this case, Jesus Christ.
That's right.
And the shadow is there. It's kind of a shadow of things to come. And I think that's the idea with Melchizedek here, which you're talking about, is that this wasn't a permanent thing. This was only temporary.
That's right.
The Jews had a hard time with that because they couldn't understand the changeover, and a lot of them had a difficult time all the way through.
Yeah.
I mean, this went on back and forth. Even Paul had to deal with that, with like circumcision.
Yep.
Why are you doing circumcision when you've been baptized already? You've been baptized with the remission of your sins, but yet you're still doing this. That type of thing. And it went on like that for a very long time. They weren't getting it. When we get to in Acts chapter 10, when you get to Cornelius, it seems almost more like some of the Gentiles seem to do better on that than the Jews did.
Yeah. And understandably, right? Baggage. I mean, they didn't have any baggage really to speak of. The Gentiles, not as much, let's say. Not as invested in the old system as the Gentiles were.
It's very, very difficult to try to convert a Jew, when somebody claims to be a Jew, to Christianity. Not that it can't be done.
We
But
talked
you
about.
have to go back to the beginning to show them what the difference between the two laws are. The problem is a lot of them only believe in the first four books of the Bible, so they're missing a lot of things. And yet the Bible talks already about Jesus even before the very beginning. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 talks about that already. There's a hint of it already, but they didn't understand that, and so they were looking for a permanent king.
That's right. And you can imagine what this author is asking these people to do, the faith that would be required to completely give up the old covenant and believe in a new covenant. That's just huge. I mean, that's just sacrilegious to a Jew. You'd be going, most of them anyway. It would take a lot of faith.
Just like John 3:16 is God so loved the world that he had forgotten the Son.
That's right.
That it would never perish or something like that.
That's exactly right. Thanks, Robert.
Good memory.
Very good memory.
I was just going to make a comment on that. When the priest went into the holiest of holies once a year, and when Zacharias went in, that dog left and he came out, they perceived that he received something from God because he couldn't talk. But Jesus, when he goes in, he doesn't come back out.
That's right.
He sits down.
He's permanent. That's right. He's eternal. So you have all these contrasts. The author's trying to contrast the old and the new, and hopefully in the process show them how much better it is. Now I know in every shape, in every way, Jesus is better. He's 13 times the word better is used. 15 times the word perfect is used in Hebrews. Trying to make the point here, trying to convince his friends that, how can I convince you to let go of something that is obsolete? That'd be a lot of faith. That'd just be somebody saying, you can't play golf on Sundays anymore. That would be traumatic for me. Just be traumatic. I don't know how I'd get over it. But that was a joke, Gladys. I'll do better. That was not a good joke, actually. Good comment, Gene. Anything else? All right, yes. Brother Joe mentioned about the shadow a couple weeks ago before. That's a big thing. That's a huge thing. Everything in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, is just pointing toward the New. That's all it is. That's why you got to look at it. There's types and antitypes. Melchizedek was a type of Christ. He had a lot in common with Jesus, but Jesus had the triple crown. He was a prophet, a king, and a priest. And so you have the fact that Jesus could not be a priest, it said, on earth, because he wasn't from the line. Even if he was on earth, he couldn't be a priest because he wasn't from the Levitical. He was from Judah. He wasn't from Levi. So all this is contrasting. When you read through this stuff, it's trying to convince his readers, look, this is so much better. It's in the Old Testament. You should have been reading this for years and years and years. It's right in front of you. Now it's come true. Do you see it? Do you understand it? And he's got his hands full here trying to convince his audience. It'd be hard to swallow. Mm-hmm. It'd be like a big pill. Yeah, a really big one. Yeah.
You know, we run into that when we teach the gospel sometimes to people today. You try to teach the Seventh-day Adventists, and they try to mix old and new all the time. I mean, that's what they're doing in essence.
Yeah.
And trying to get them to see that we're not under that, that they don't understand that.
Yeah.
We have to show them all the different things, and that's where you have to bring some of this up to them, because otherwise they have no way of understanding.
I hear you.
And I've gone to Jamaica, we work with some, we try to teach some of these people, and it's like it was going in one ear and out the other. They weren't getting it.
My wife's sister she's been in the Seventh-day Adventists for quite a while, and they've ruined that woman. She's gone. I mean, it's really sad. They have no contact with her mom, my mom, her sister. None, zero. They got her brainwashed. She gave them everything she had, and it's sad. It's sad. Joe.
I was going to say, he's not just saying that the new is better than the old. He's saying the new is like immeasurably better than the old. It's the whole idea of the shadow. If you think about reality versus shadow, if you live in the reality, then you see the shadow. You can barely recognize that shadow is a reflection of somehow the reality.
Yeah.
It's nothing
Yeah.
compared to the reality.
Yeah.
The reality is in heaven, in the new tabernacle, in the presence of God. The old one was like, it's nothing compared to what we have.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, it's not just better, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's eternal. Jesus is never going to end. The old priesthood, they were priests for life, and they died, and they had to have continually appointments for priesthood. Now, there's no more. No more priesthood. The priesthood is not on earth, it's in heaven. God and Jesus are in the earthly tabernacle, in the heavenly tabernacle now together. They're reigning together. Let me make a couple comments here before I lose my train of thought. Mr. Kaufman, as I just read chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. Now the main point of what we're saying is this. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven. So Jesus is he's in the heavenly tabernacle now, right? He's with God permanently now. He doesn't go in once in a while. He goes behind the curtain and he's there permanently. He's sitting down. But verse 2 says, and who serves in the sanctuary. So he's serving. So not only is he sitting down, but he's serving. So it's a different type of tabernacle altogether. If one would have gone to the temple in Jerusalem, you would have seen a beehive of activity all the time, just constant sacrifices, and the priests everywhere, and the high priest doing his thing back there, moving around. This sets a picture, as Mr. Kaufman said, which I thought was very interesting. He said not only is he sitting down, right, but he's not busying himself with what would be going on in the earthly tabernacle. His pure existence in the in the tabernacle, in the heavenly tabernacle, is efficient enough. Him just being there keeps things working in the right way for us. So he's the great mediator, the great guarantor of a different mediator between God and man. And it draws us much closer to God, him being right with God. And the whole system functions around Jesus. Did you want to say something, Russ? Somebody had their hand up there?
It's interesting you talk about the shadow and what the role of Jesus. And if you look through history, you can see all the things that were leading up to the church in Acts chapter 2. The establishment of the Greek kingdom, where everybody was speaking Greek, meant that the church could spread quickly with one language. In fact, they used the Greek Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Old Testament Hebrew. And then they had the universal monetary system. Everybody was using the
Bitcoin?
Roman coinage. What'd you say? Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
No, a little bit before that.
PayPal?
Yeah, and then they had a universal road system, so if someone attacked you on a Roman road, they would have to answer to the Roman government. So the church was able to spread more quickly. And even in Jesus' time, there was a problem because the children didn't know how to speak Hebrew. They were losing the ability to speak Hebrew because they were carrying Greek Bibles. And so then they started the system of having the rabbis teach the children on Fridays behind the synagogues to try to reestablish that Hebrew language. So I think all those elements were kind of leading up to the disbanding of the old law, getting them ready for a foundation for the new. But like you said, it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
I mean,
They were entrenched.
yeah, I can appreciate it, how difficult it would be. The faith now, doesn't the same hold true for us? I mean, you could say to us, a life before we became baptized into Christ, we have to let that go. Some of the things I had to change in my life were easy. Other things are very hard. So it's all relative, right? Yes. Anybody else? Okay, let's continue on. So this heavenly sanctuary, verse 2, chapter 8, verse 2, where God's seated in heaven with God the Father. He's keeping everything functioning really nicely, very efficiently, just by his existence there. Painting a picture now, right? He's trying to paint a picture to his audience. This is the new system. It's not an earthly system. It's a heavenly system. And he's going to play on that in his referring back to Jeremiah. We'll read that in just a moment. So Jesus serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle set up by the Lord, not made by mere human being. Every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. And so it was necessary for this one, Jesus, to have something to offer. If he were on earth, he would not be a priest, for there are already priests who offer the gifts prescribed by the law. That's the Old Testament. They serve at a sanctuary that is a copy, a shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned when he was about to build the tabernacle, quote, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain." Now that's Exodus 25:40. Now, Mr. Kaufman, Russ, goes on and on and on about this pattern. He thinks this mention of the pattern is just one of the most important aspects of the entire book of Hebrews. And it filters through our pattern in the New Testament. God seems to be, he's a God of order. He loves order. He loves things lined up perfectly the way he wants them because he knows what's best for us. So Mr. Kaufman goes on and on and on about this pattern that we see play out in worship. We see it play out in the plan of salvation, just like it played out in the law. There was a lot of laws, 613 laws. What was the goal of the law? The old law. What was one of the primary goals? Right? You had people that just didn't know that God showed his character, a big part of his character. He said, look, this is right and this is wrong. That was a big part of the old law, okay? Why? Because we need guardrails, right? Those are guardrails, just like Russ talked about on Sunday. I woke up right at the end. I caught part of that. But, I'm kidding.
The old law, like, thou shalt love your neighbor, right?
That's right. That's right. Yep. One of the 10 Commandments. Yep. Yep. Now that's great. We don't realize it how much we need. Well, I do as I get older. Years ago, I remember I was in a group of Christians, and there was a young lady that wasn't a Christian, and we were talking about Christian stuff, and we were talking about that, how much we need, left up to our own actions and desires. That's what you see with Israel. That's what you see with anyone. Historically, the Old Testament tells us how bad things can get if we try to live our life according to our own what is right and what is wrong. If we don't have any guardrails, we'll just wander off, and it happens all the time. That happens in the New Testament as well. The narrow road, right, was opposed to the wide road. And we had a conversation with this young lady who wasn't a Christian, and she thought that was so oppressive, as a lot of people do. One of the reasons why people don't come to church, they don't, and I know I did. I didn't want to change the things. I was having fun doing what I used to do in my old life. It was a lot of fun. It was wrong, but it was a lot of fun. So it's hard. It's hard. You're asking these Jewish people, right, to stop being Hebrews, stop being Hebrews. It's like a lot of people out there in the world won't come in here because they don't want to give up the things that they like to do. It's hard. It's hard, and you got to appreciate that. Pardon me?
They want to keep being outsiders, so
That's just human nature, Robert. It's human nature. Our nature is weak. We give in and do things that we shouldn't do because we're just flat out weak. We are a crazy invention.
say coming to church right now.
That's why it's so important. That's right. That's why it's so important and so difficult. If you're really living the Christian life, it's hard. It's hard. It's constant friction between what I want to do and what I shouldn't do all the time. That's what you're seeing here in a roundabout way. One Hebrew telling another Hebrew, man, don't do what you used to do, or someone becoming a Christian and trying to give up some of the things. It takes a long time. It's challenging. Yes, Gene.
So good to the Jews. Gave them everything they wanted. Let them do everything, took it back. Just like Isaiah is one of the biggest books of confession, that if you'll come back to me, I'll do this. If you come back to me, I'll do this. And so they got to the point where they thought that, well, we can do anything to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it says right here in verse 9 at the end of it. And they regarded them not, said the Lord. I gave them all these commandments, but they regarded them not. So that's why we understand what Lau preaches about. Dark ages, God done away with it. It had nothing more to do with it for about 500 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sent Jesus Christ at the right time to give every man on earth a chance to have salvation.
Yeah, you're right. I think God, with His grace, right, sets up the old law to help the population of the world deal with. You want to get that? Oh, you got it? Okay. God sets up the old law. Yeah, thanks, Ben. I think he might. Yeah. The old law was set up in such a way to help the people deal with their sin temporarily, all pointing to a new system, a much better system, right? Now we're going to see that. And we're going to see the writer refer back and use Jeremiah. What was going on in Jeremiah's day? What was going on in Judah when Jeremiah, over a 40, 50-year period, writes about his struggles with warning his countrymen, the Judeans, to stop their stop their sinful ways year after year after year. And God just he put up with it. He put up with the Israelites, and he put up with it with the Judeans until he just didn't put up with it anymore. So it's amazing what he put up with. I mean, how many human beings would do that? Seriously.
But yes, and he gave them a chance to come back. But there comes a day, and especially when he dispersed them, he said enough is enough. And that day will come to this earth one
That's
day
right.
too. He will say enough is enough. I don't know what that day will be or when it will be, but he will finally say,
Yeah.
those who love me will be with me, and those who don't want to follow me will not.
And that's what he says right here.
It's a very sad day, in one sense anyway. It'll be a very happy day for those who are going to be with him.
Somebody else had their arm up back there? Oh, let's do one more thing here. We're almost done. I tell you what, let's wait, because I don't want to rush through that. It's already 7:30, and I apologize. I've got a hair appointment. I've got to go. I'm kidding.
I think it says 6:30.
Does it? Oh yeah.
Oh, we're just starting.
It just started.
I got it. Yeah, the second hour will be much better. No. We'll pick up next time, and we're going to talk from verses 7 all the way down through 12. And it helps to have a little background on Jeremiah. If you want to just refresh your memory on what happened with Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, that would help us understand a little bit about, again, this author using the Old Testament to try to convince his friends to hang in there. And there's a lot of similarities between what was going on during Jeremiah's lifetime as what went on in it's just another way for this author to say, look, the Israelites did this and the Judeans did this. It's quite fascinating. The author, again, is trying to convince us to hang in there. He's trying to convince his audience of the day to hang in there. And that's what this is all about. Jesus is much better in every way. Okay? Thanks for your comments. Let's have a quick prayer. We'll close up, and we'll adjourn for the evening. Father, thanks again so much for all those who have made the choice to be here tonight. Father, watch over everyone as we travel home. Be with us in our Christian walk. Help us to read and study your word. We're so thankful for the baptisms that we had on Sunday afternoon. So thankful for Russ and what he does there. He's this wonderful evangelist, Father. Help us to mimic him in our lives, and we're thankful for what he does in the pulpit and what he does out of the pulpit, Father. So thank you for your word. Help it to become a permanent part of our hearts and minds so we can live